I'm Marina Lafrosia.
And I'm Monica Birch. And this is your new summer reading list.
Where we take a look at your favorite,
or maybe your least favorite,
required reading books.
Today, we're going to take a look at Murder on the Orient Express. Ooh, I said today like a kindergarten teacher.
Well, I think it still works.
It does. I think it works.
Okay.
Hello, class.
So, today we're going to be talking about Murder on the Orient Express, like Monica said, by Agatha Christie, a real legend of mystery novels, of women novelists in general. So, yeah, I guess we'll just dive right in.
Shout out to her liking our tweet and following her Twitter.
Well, yeah, like her estate, which I guess who runs her account. But
her
that's pretty, that means we're pretty famous in the literature world. On hashtag book Twitter, hashtag book Instagram, Bookstagram.
I don't know.
We're one of you.
So, like always, we're going to start with our history with the book, whether we've read it, whether we've not read it. I feel like I start a lot, so Marina, why don't you start?
Okay, so my past experience with the book is none. So I haven't read this one. So this is my first time reading it. I did read Agatha Christie novels in like middle school. I read And Then There Were None, which was one of like my favorite books of all time.
That's hers?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, we've been talking about this book for a month now.
Yeah.
Didn't realize it was also her.
So I think I read it in the 7th grade. I have like a vivid memory of reading it in like 7th grade science class for some reason, but
science?
Yeah, like, you know, when you would just like read for fun.
Oh, I get what
you're
saying. I thought you meant like it was required in science.
No, that wouldn't make any sense. But yeah, so I do remember reading it in like 7th grade, and that was like when it was like, you know, big Twilight days. So like I must have really enjoyed it if I read it over reading Twilight. But yeah, so I read some of her other novels, but I've never read this one. And I know this is like one of the like biggest ones, one of the most popular. But yeah, so I hadn't read this one. So this is a brand new experience for me. And I'm pretty excited to talk about it now.
So I also have never read Murder on the Orient Express.
Is this the first time that we've both not read the novel before?
Maybe. Because I read Frankenstein.
Yes.
You read 1984.
Yes.
And you read The Giver.
Yes.
So yes. New experience for us. I didn't even realize that.
I didn't either till right now.
I had seen the movie, so that kind of helped with the reading of it, because it would be like there's a bajillion characters, but I knew all the characters going into it. So yeah, and we'll talk about the movie a little bit later. But no, I didn't even realize this was a required reading book until we did research on like what books students have to read in school, and like this was one of them.
Yeah, it's weird too, because I guess I never was required to read it, and for some reason I feel like in middle school, because like so my younger brothers also had the same experience where they both read Agatha Christie books in middle school, so I don't know what it is about middle school that makes everybody want to read Agatha Christie. But
the story, I guess everybody just catch people's attention.
Yeah, so I don't know, I was never required to read it. Like I read it for fun, which seems weird as like, I don't know,
but not this one, a different one.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I have seen it, like you said, we've done a little research to see if it's on any required reading lists, and it is. So.
And I actually, this is my first mystery novel too, so that was pretty cool. I have been meaning to read Angels and Demons and The Da Vinci Code, but I have not gotten to it like the other 100 books on my list. So yeah, that's our history. As always, then we'll move on to how we felt now. So what do you think?
Okay, so I did really enjoy it. I have read like I said, a few mystery novels, not just Agatha Christie, but just like a handful. I would say that like, I guess trying to compare like reading a mystery novel to like other mystery media, whereas like I guess most of my experience would be like on television or in movies. It's like really interesting to me that like, especially I realized after reading this, since I've read other Agatha Christie novels, it's really interesting that you can't like yourself, like you would never be able to figure out the mystery.
Yeah. Which
I think is an appeal of like mystery novels versus like mysteries in other types of media. But it's just like something that you actually like physically could never figure out, because you're not that character who's like, well, I'm just guessing and then my guess was correct.
There's
like,
no I feel like some have to have like some clues where you can kind of pick up on it.
Yeah, so there's like things that you're like, you could pick up on a little and be like, you think you're in the know, but you're not. Like, you never know until the reveal. And I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I feel like a lot of people would feel the same way. But I mean, especially in this novel, like, that's something that I guess I would have just never assumed, because there's a lot of assumptions that he has to make to get to that correct answer.
Yeah, a lot.
So, which I'm sure we'll go into. But overall, I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was like a fun experience, like the suspense and stuff. And I'm sure we'll pick apart other things later, but overall, I did enjoy it.
Yeah, I would say I actually really enjoyed it too. It wasn't like a current mystery novel, like Gone Girl or something, where there's like intense suspense and all this crazy stuff.
Or like, what was that one that was popular a few years ago? The one with the train.
The girl on the train. Girl on the train.
That was
the girl on the train. Either the or without. But yeah, it's definitely like, you can tell this was written a long time ago. Almost like if you watch a comedy from the 70s and then you watch a comedy now, I'm like, these are different. They're both comedies, but they're different. So yeah, it was really good. That was just a little side note I noticed. And yeah, I was happy this was my first mystery novel, and I'm gonna move on to other ones. Yeah, this one never ever popped up at all in my required reading. Even like when we had to do the like not required but kind of required reading, where they were like, just pick any book. It wasn't even an option. So
okay.
But anyways, yeah, I really like this book, and I'm excited to dive into it because Agatha Christie is pretty cool. Yeah, and I'm interested now to read more of her and Hercule's work. We're having a really fun time trying to pronounce his name.
Perot. I'm just gonna say
Hercule. See, I could say it before we started, and now I'm like
Hercule.
Hercule Perot. In the movie, they joke that it looks like Hercules, and I appreciate
that. That's how I read
joke.
it in my head the whole time. Hercules Peridot.
Hercules Peridot. That's amazing.
No.
So, all right, we'll do what we always do and jump into a little background knowledge on the author. So, some of the information I have and what I researched is more based on how she got to writing Murder on the Orient Express. I don't know if you have more of her history, or what did you find?
Well, I was gonna more talk about like what her like estate and stuff is doing now with like the Reed Christie.
So then I'll go first.
Challenge. Yeah.
So I did find some stuff about her, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe part of the reason we have these stories is because her first husband traveled a lot. I want to say he was in the military. You can look him up. She can correct me, but I know she traveled a lot, and that's where these stories came from, and why she knew so much about these locations and why she wrote about them, because she writes a lot about her life, which you'll see with this book. Like, she pretty much writes exactly what's happening to her. For example, Murder on the Orient Express, if you read it, it's very obviously based on the Lindbergh case. And if you don't know that, that's a very famous, like, not a cold case because they did eventually find the killer, but a very famous kidnapping/murder case of a famous pilot's daughter, where they paid the ransom and then they still found, I think it took them a long time to find the kid in the real story. They found like his remains in the backyard. Very spooky. Yeah. Or not the backyard, but like the woods near them. In the book, there is a kid that goes missing, kidnapped from a famous pilot, but in the book it's named Armstrong. Yes. And she even said it influenced her, and it came out 2 years after the case, the book did. On top of that, she had a neighbor who was a retired Belgian police officer. So that's the reason why Perot exists. So she bases a lot on her life. Okay. That makes sense. So it seems like her second husband is the one who was the archaeologist, where she went and traveled a lot. Archaeologist.
But the first husband is where she got the last name Christie from. Okay. So
thank you. Good thing we have Google.
Yes.
So you were going to talk about what her estate is currently doing.
Yes. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about, which I thought was really interesting, was, I guess it's whoever runs her accounts now, you know, so I'm assuming it would be her estate and people who are related or have been put in charge. Or hired by the people who are related to her. So on all of her accounts and on the website, agathachristie.com, she has this thing, which I didn't know that was something that they did until when I was looking up stuff for this book. But apparently, I guess it's been going on for like a few years now. where it's like a Read Christie like challenge, and then there's a little thing you can print out if you like go onto our website and sign up like with your email. You'll get like a little thing in your email just saying like, here's like the list of challenges, and then it's like, oh, read one of the mystery novels that takes place on transportation. So like that's this book, like,
yeah, and
you on the Orient Express.
Retweeted that on our Twitter.
Yeah,
that's what they liked.
Yes, and so that will cross off that for us. I'll maybe try and do it throughout the year.
Yeah, I'll probably read
a lot
other
of times,
ones.
but also not a lot of time.
But
I will try my best because I'm pretty interested in trying to check off the list because it's pretty fun. Like they have like a whole bunch of little like different things, like a story set in a grand house, and like she has so many novels that you can pick and choose. Like there's many things that work for all of these, so it's not just like one.
I was gonna say there's probably others we could have crossed off with this one.
Yeah, for sure. And so I don't know, it's just really fun. It's something that they do. And then so obviously the new one is Read Christie 2021, and so I guess there is, you know, enough time for us to kind of go through and see if we can complete the challenge ourselves, or any of our listeners.
I mean, we are going to read another one of her books this year.
Yes.
Which one is it? Oh, you said it.
And Then There Were None.
And Then There Were None.
So
look out for that. That reminds me though, we did tell you last week we were going to be posting, and we didn't.
Oh, right.
So what happened to us? It's a mystery.
And we're here to solve this mystery
like
right
Scooby-Doo.
now.
Oh, you could have worn your Scooby-Doo jacket.
Well, wasn't the time. But yeah, anyways, life got in the way. People get busy.
School
we get
and
busy.
work.
Yeah, school and work. You know, it's just life. But here we are. It's only 7 days later, so I'm sure you guys
Not
are
even
hanging on by a thread trying to figure out where we went. But
I know. Our readers, our listeners. Why do I say readers?
Our readers.
Jesus.
It's okay. They'll understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where we are. We'll try and give more updates if we ever like disappear for a little bit again. But we're back.
That's
so
part of the mystery.
That's the important part. So yeah, anyways, if you haven't checked it out, you should go to agathachristie.com and look at the Read Christie 2021 like list. You know, put in your email, get a little email, print out your own chart of what you want to do for this year.
Force yourself to read.
Yes, and this is like she's a great author to like get into reading again. If you're one of those people that's like, wow, I used to love reading and now I don't read anymore. Her novels are like, I don't know, they're really like you can't put them down once you start them. You know, like it'll keep you
in a day.
Yeah, like it'll keep you reading. It's not like none of them are super crazy long. Like what was this one, like 230 pages?
And the text was big.
Yeah, so you can get through it. It's like a good way to jump back into novels, and like mystery will always keep you on the edge. And like I said, like you can never guess what's gonna happen at the end. They're gonna blow you away. So
yeah, she's especially good at that. So
yes.
Exciting. As you can tell, we love Agatha Christie.
Yes.
Seems to be a trend of loving some of the female authors, as last week we couldn't stop talking about Lois Lowry.
Yes.
And I also love Mary Shelley. So
yes.
George Orwell's pretty cool, although I can't remember his life story, so don't put merit to what I just said. But as always, I've said that like 4 times now, but we will move on to explaining the plot to you guys before we explain some of our thoughts and feelings and symbols, just so you get a small background in case you didn't understand from what you read, or if you didn't read. If you didn't read, pause, go read the Spark Notes, or I guess you can listen, because I wrote pretty A+ notes.
Yeah, so we're just going to go through the plot, essentially, and then as we go through, we'll, you know, comment on anything we want to comment on, and then wrap up our comments afterwards and add any additional thoughts, if we have additional thoughts.
As always. Gosh, I'm going to say that 20 times.
That's okay. They'll know it's as always.
We should create a bingo game. Me saying as always, you saying last week.
Actually, you just said it a second ago, I think.
Did?
Instead of last
one.
But anyways, so,
Someone's
as always, we're going to go ahead and talk about the plot.
So, and this one we really had to think about because it's a lot. It's very packed in. But basically, the book starts with like setting up that Poirot. I'm gonna look at you every time I say it. Sorry, I'm just gonna be confident. Poirot. The book starts with showing you that Poirot can just solve any odd crime. It really shows his ability to do so, and then he's not in Istanbul. I think they make a stop. He's in Istanbul. He's in Istanbul.
Yeah, they get stopped in Yugoslavia.
Okay, thank you. And he gets a call that he has to return to London for a case he already kind of guessed the result of. And it made it seem like they kind of like ignored what he said, but now they're listening to him. So he has to be rushed back to London and rushed and put on just any place they could find on the Orient Express.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to get the next point.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, so, Okay, so he originally goes to like a hotel, and he's planning to stay there for a few days before he like travels back. But then he gets like that notice that he needs to be in London like right away. And so that's when he's like, okay, well, let me just get on the next train.
And it's winter time,
right?
Hence the snow on our table for the viewers.
Yes,
listeners, there's snow on our table.
Yeah, so he's like, okay, like goes up to the little desk and then's like, okay, get me on the next train, like get me my train car, like everything's gonna be fine. And so then he's like, oh yeah, it's like there's a lot of people on here, like we can gotta make sure we can find you a train car.
Yeah.
And then
there was actually no room for him at all.
Yes. And then he was saying that one guy didn't show up, right?
Yes, a passenger didn't show up, so his friend who runs the train said, well, since it's like 30 minutes or so before the train starts, that guy loses his right to the passenger car or his little bed, and Poirot gets it. So he is now on the Orient Express.
Yep, so he gets in, and like, this is very unusual for the train to be so packed.
Usually be like 2 people
at
or
that
something.
time of day specifically, and then like that time of year. And that it's full of like very different people.
Yeah, so just
all
about to say,
diverse.
They make a point to comment on like it was more diverse than you would expect to see. Like a lot of different people from around the world.
Yes.
So very interesting. So one of the passengers, he is called Ratchet. If you watch the movie, it's Johnny Depp. Just so you can follow along, movie watchers. Me to myself. But he is sort of this rough American guy, and he admits to Poirot that he is in danger and wants a detective's help of solving who is sending him threats.
Right, Poirot and this is while they're at the hotel before they get into the train car, and they're kind of eating dinner.
Yes, just introducing a character, really. And Poirot pretty much says, I don't like your face.
Yes, that was the funniest thing to me. I actually highlighted that because I wanted to talk about it.
Because I don't like your face.
Someone else actually says that later. And then I was like, wow, they all felt the same. They all hated his face.
Yeah. So the reason we're mentioning him is because on night 2, he is found, well, he's murdered and he's found in the morning. Dun dun dun. So there's the mystery, is who killed Ratchet?
Yes.
So,
indeed.
As we mentioned, I think we mentioned it, or it's kind of obvious. Oh, we did. The train car's packed, and we get to meet a lot of the passengers. Yes. Something interesting is there are a bunch of other passengers, but they're in other, like, these things that I need to verbally say to the listeners.
Like the train. Okay, so we're not good on train terminology, but the train cars are all the separate sections. So like the lower class ones are ignored because they're like, it couldn't have been ignored them completely because their doors are locked. They were locked in their rooms. I thought that was a little odd. Yeah, so like they're locked in. It all takes place in like the upper two train first and second cars. Class. Yes, and then like the dining hall for those two. So there are other people on the train, but just as a side note, I thought that was interesting because in the movie, like, there weren't any other people on the train. Oh, interesting. But I guess that was just for ease. I hate that I have a cough, and I apologize to everyone. I can just, like, feel I'm gonna cough multiple times throughout this. That's okay. So basically we made a list for our sanity and your sanity of who the characters are. So if you would like to say the first one while I cough. Okay. So his name was, like, Michel? Michel, that's his last name. He was one of the, I can't say it, Wagon Lee? Well, they used another term. A conductor. Yes, the conductor. The conductor. Well, there's 3 of them, right? But he's the main one who they like talking to. He's one for the first class car. Yeah, so there's like 3 of those guys. Well, I guess I should premise this. I should say this first, is we're telling you all of these people's backstories because this is their alibis. So, right. Poirot interviews them to see who murdered Ratchet, and this is what all of their answers are. Yeah, so we'll just kind of go through what we're going to do is, so after Ratchet is discovered, Poirot sits down with every single one of these passengers, and then asks them, like, what were you doing last night? Like, you know, what's
explain
your alibi?
Your relation.
Yeah, explain your relation if you knew him, whatever. So then that's when we kind of get introduced to every character.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of seen them and given like little introductions, like, oh, that person looks ugly, and I just remember that because he's talking specifically about
Mrs.
the
Hubbard.
woman. Yes,
yeah, he doesn't like
toad faced. They use
that's the princess.
Oh, that's who I was talking about, not Hubbard. Yes, the princess, the Russian princess.
Hubbard is pretty. She's just obnoxious.
Yeah, she's the American lady.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but anyways, so he's given little descriptions about them, but we haven't really met them. So this is when we meet them, is during the alibis. Okay, so we did have Michel, and he was one of the conductors who's like tending to all the passengers. Mm-hmm. And so he's saying that he like sat in his little seat where he's supposed to sit when he's waiting to see if anybody rings their bell while he's working. And so he's there the whole night except for like about 1 to 2 when he was talking to one of the other conductors.
Yeah, and he's only called back when he hears a bunch of ringing, like because they ring the bells for his attention.
So he rushes over whenever there's a bell ring.
So the next character is McQueen. He is, I want to say, kind of like an assistant to Ratchet.
Yeah, he used this term receptionist. Or secretary.
Yeah, so he helps him with a lot of his work. But his alibi was he was drinking with Colonel Abernathy until like 2 a.m. So he had an alibi with that.
Yes.
And then we have, I'll just go ahead and say the next one because I started talking. We have the valet to Ratchet, which is Edward Henry Masterman. He was awake pretty much the whole night with a toothache, which gave an accidental alibi to his coachmate, the Italian man.
Right.
Oh my God, now I'm gonna sneeze.
Blush.
I hope you guys love allergy season as much as I do.
Okay, but when you were reading, or like when he was describing the toothache, did it make your teeth hurt? Because I feel like it made my teeth hurt.
No, but I can see why it did, because that's a
like,
very
oh my
you
God.
thing.
Yes, when he was like, oh, I was moaning all night long.
I felt like he was being whiny.
I was scared for
but
my
yeah,
teeth.
So he kind of gave the Italian man an alibi, as I mentioned. So the next one, if you'd like to say.
Okay, so Miss Hubbard, who is the American woman who is, like Monica said, very obnoxious seeming. She's very, I don't know, full of life. Like, she wants to just keep talking.
Yes, loud.
And so, yes, loud, obnoxious kind
the
of character.
The only character in the audiobook that talks fast.
And then, so she gives the Swedish woman, who I don't know how to say her name.
She has a first name.
Greta?
Greta.
Is her first name, so we're going to call her Greta, because I would like to not offend if I haven't, like, looked up how to say name. But, so the Swedish woman, she gave her some aspirin. And then Miss Hubbard also claims to have seen a man in her room, like last night. And so she comes forward, like, right away when there's, like, the murder has been announced, and she wants to talk to authority immediately. Like, oh my God, I saw a man. He was there. I need to tell somebody. Somebody help me. So yeah, that's her.
And then we have Greta.
Yes.
Would you like to go into Greta?
Okay, so she's the woman who was the Swedish woman who got aspirin from Miss Hubbard.
She cried a lot.
Yes, she does cry a lot. She's kind of just like freaking out the whole time.
She is,
like that's her shtick, is that she's just panicking.
Always panicking.
And then Miss Hubbard's like, oh, yeah, I know. Miss Hubbard's like, oh, don't worry, like nobody's mad at you, all this stuff. Honestly, before like the ending, I kind of really liked them, like together. Yeah. I was like, oh, it's so nice that she's like reassuring her.
I'm still okay with them at the ending, honestly.
I mean, yeah, same. But I mean, like, we know that it's like fake. But
yeah.
Anyways. Shall we continue?
Yeah, so, well, we didn't say, also, Greta was apparently the last one to see Ratchet alive, because when she was going to get the aspirin, she actually walked into Ratchet's room.
Car.
Yes. And he said something suggestive to her, but they never say what it was.
Yeah, they just, in this novel, they mentioned so much blushing.
Yes.
Like, anytime somebody says anything, it's like, wow, she was blushing. Or she was blushed. She was flushed.
And I believe she also slept in the same room as Mary. So, Mary, she is Mary's alibi, which we will get to.
Yes.
So the next one is Hildegard Schmidt. She is the lady's maid to the Russian princess. And she actually got a drink from the conductor for the princess when the princess was going to bed. But we find out it was not the conductor Michelle. So who was it?
Who was this person?
Very sketchy. So would you like to say the next one?
Okay, so I won't be able to say this correctly, but Antonio. So we have the Italian man, who his first name is Antonio, and then Foscinelli, something like that, but Antonio, the Italian man.
He's like an Italian American, we should also point out. Like, he's in America, but an Italian immigrant.
Mm-hmm. He's an Italian immigrant. And so the way that they refer to him a lot is just the Italian, because he's the only one there.
This was a time of not kindness to Italians.
Yes. But so he was like sleeping all night. The valet, like, you know, vouches for him because they like share a room.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was saying that was the guy with the toothache. And so they have their
The guy with the toothache was awake, and
so he was saying anytime I woke up I just heard him moaning, and then I like went back to sleep.
Yeah.
So they give each other an alibi.
Mm-hmm.
So Miss
Cyrus
Book. The guy.
I've been saying Boku. I don't know. I think it's French.
It is, but like book.
It's not book.
But it's not Boku. There's no O at the end.
The movie.
Bach. Not Bach.
We obviously can't pronounce European last names.
I feel like when I heard in the audiobook it was closer to book. Okay. But it had like more of a flair than that. So it's not book.
Maybe that's why it's
yeah. Anyways, if somebody really wants to come for us, or if I don't know,
I'm like about
Agatha Christie people listen to this, I'm so sorry.
No.
But
we knew it literally 2 minutes before the filming started. I want you to
So Book, who has been with Poirot, he suspects Antonio's only because he is Italian.
Mm-hmm.
And
very much wants to interview him.
Yes, and it's like, it must be the Italian guy. It must be him.
Mm-hmm.
Because we didn't mention this yet, but Ratchet, when he was found dead from stab wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Like many stab wounds. And so Book was like, yeah, it has to be the Italian. You know, the passion stabbing, that's like their weapon of choice, because when you're Italian, you stab people.
And you're used to murder, according to this man.
Any other nationality, like, what is your preferred method of murder? I'm not sure, but for Italians, apparently it's stabbing.
It is, I can confirm. Just kidding. Then we have Cyrus Hardman. This guy would always like disappear in my mind, like, don't ask me why. But basically he is an American detective that was hired by Ratchet to watch out for him. So he was sitting in his room staring at the hallway. So he kind of gave almost everyone an alibi, because he was like, I didn't see anyone walking around at all, except like exactly what other people have said with the conductor going in and all that stuff. That's basically his. And then we have the Count and Countess Andretti.
Yes. They are Hungarian, yes?
Maybe, yes.
Okay.
We really do know all this stuff beforehand. It's just like during we're like, maybe.
I mean, there's 12 characters, and that's like 12 more characters than we've had in any of the past novels we've done already.
I don't think they had a full alibi, except like they were in their room and they're not to be disturbed. So
and they kind of just speak for each other.
Yeah. I mean, she barely speaks. She's just like...
I know, because at first they want to speak to her, and he's like, you don't need to speak to my wife.
Yeah, very aggressive.
And then they're like, but could we?
And then would you like to mention the next lady? Because she makes you sad.
Okay, so Princess Dragon...
I say Dragomov. Yeah.
Okay, yes. So she's a Russian princess.
An older lady, not to be confused with a young princess.
Yeah, so we kind of have a connotation, I guess, in English that princess is like a young person, but that's not necessarily true, because of like just actually how royalty works. So it would make sense that she's still a princess when she's old. But she's an older woman, and they describe her very rudely in the novel. And they call her toad-faced many times, like not just once to describe what she is, like who she is. Like several times she's described as toad-faced, which it did make me feel sad for her, because I feel like she was mostly fine.
She was fine.
I mean, like, she's a rich royalty person. She was
kind of just like to the point. Like, I didn't feel like anything was rude. It was just like cut and dry. But kind of as we mentioned a little earlier, her lady's maid helped her fall asleep. So she saw that she wasn't a part of the attack.
Mm-hmm.
And then our last two, we also kind of already gave their alibi with Colonel Abernathy.
Mm-hmm.
But see how funny Abernathy sounds, and it's not spelled like that. But like I'm 99.99% sure it's that because
I didn't
of the movie.
even remember that it was spelled like that. I guess in my head. So I had gone through and read the novel first, and then like this past week I listened to part of like the audiobook. So I guess like in my head I was thinking it was spelled completely different than when I read it. But I mean, same thing with Colonel. That's not spelled how it sounds.
But this is only because, again, I watched the movies before, so I was reading it like, oh, I know who this person is. But as you mentioned, he was drinking with McQueen till like 2 a.m. They both told the same story.
Mm-hmm.
And then same with Mary, the governess. She was in the same car as Greta, the woman who cries and needs aspirin. And Greta made it very clear she's a light sleeper, and if anyone had woken up, she would have felt it. So basically, they all have airtight alibis, which throws Poirot off. He doesn't like that. It feels too odd, like too clean. There's another theory that someone broke in because Ratchet's window was open, broke in and left, but it's kind of made clear very quick that that's just not the case because it's the dead of winter and the train is stuck.
What is that stuff called? I should know. But he blows that like powder stuff to see if there's any fingerprints left behind, and there was not. So he knows it was somebody who was smart and like cleaned up all the fingerprints, because even if like it would have just been like Ratchet's fingerprints or something from like touching the window, those are all gone. Like there's no fingerprints at all. So he knows it's somebody who knows what they're doing. I think also we didn't talk about...
But they're just like trapped in a snowstorm, and they think they would have seen the footprints, or the person wouldn't have made it very far.
We haven't talked about that they've gotten stopped in a snowstorm yet.
Yeah, we didn't make that clear. I mean, not every detail has to be known, but as you can tell, viewers, by our setup, there is a snowstorm and a train stuck in the snowstorm, and that happens close to the same time that Ratchet is considered to be murdered. So
it's like during the night when the train stops because of like unpredicted weather, snow. They're snowed in pretty much, but in a train. And this is in Yugoslavia where they are stopped.
And that's partly why Poirot has been tasked with solving this crime, is because they know it's just going to take so much more time when they arrive at their next destination and the police do their whole investigation. Or instead, Poirot could figure it out in the interim and just be like, here you go, here's the killer. So, yeah, that's why all this is happening with Poirot. So basically, that's our 12 people's alibis. Well, 13.
We didn't talk about the doctor.
Well, these were the people that were
but should we like
interviewed?
Because he's with Poirot while they're all
basically the Boku guy and the doctor are both with Poirot the whole time. He's being interviewed. Neither of them are ever suspected. They're just there giving information and helping him decide. That's basically it.
Yes, and the doctor is the one who does the autopsy, so he gives like important details. So of
one
how
stab's left-handed.
One stab, is different than the other.
Some are stronger, some are weak. Some the persons have their eyes closed.
Which is why at first they really lean into there were two murderers, or there was somebody who murdered him, and then the next person came in and didn't know he was murdered, and then tried to murder him.
That one feels so stupid.
But, like, you would know, I feel like, I mean, I've never stabbed a body before, but I feel like you would know if you were stabbing a dead body versus, like, a living person.
I think in their mind, they were thinking, oh, well, the woman was irrational and ran in and just, like, stabbed and left. Like,
yeah, so their first theory was, like, oh, it was a man, and then there was a woman afterwards, because these are, like, weaker stabs.
And they weren't working together? I'm surprised they wouldn't guess working together, but, like, one of the theories was, but, like, the really one they were sticking to was, like, no, two random murderers.
Yeah. And so they have to figure out why, he's being targeted, and who is he that people want to kill him. And
they discover through one of he's sent letters of, like, threatening letters, and Poirot uncovers one of them, and you discover he is actually named Cassetti. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, this book is based on the Lindbergh story, but it's called the Armstrong Case.
The Lindbergh baby.
The Lindbergh baby.
Which I'm sure many people have heard that phrase before.
But this story is the Armstrong case, and it's Cassetti who is the murderer. So Cassetti kidnapped a famous pilot's baby, and killed her. because he thought he was going to get caught. Like, that was their method of, like, if they thought people were onto them, they would kill the body and leave. So that's why.
The family, wasn't the, like, mother famous for acting?
So the mother of the daughter wasn't famous. Linda Arden, the mother of the mother, so the grandmother.
Oh, okay, the grandmother.
The maternal grandmother is a famous actress, Linda Arden. So it's a very famous family.
Yes, that's where
with a lot of connections. And this was actually mentioned in the princess's alibi, is that she was in fact godmother to Sonia Armstrong, which is the mother of Daisy, and Daisy's the baby that was taken.
Okay. And then the father was the pilot.
Yes. Okay. So, but yeah. So that's where they realized, okay, so this is connected to I was about to say Lindbergh. This was connected to the Armstrong case.
Yes.
Because of the threatening letter. And then things start to unravel. Poirot does a lot of investigating.
Yes.
Finds holes in their theories. We don't really need to go into those holes, I don't think, because it's just
I would say
many.
The only thing we need to mention is that consistently in the stories, they have told of a woman who they've seen in a red kimono, who nobody can figure out who that is, because after they've gone through all the alibis, Poirot is like, I don't know who that is. And he even asks each of the women, like, what color their nightgown is.
And a conductor.
Yes.
No one's seen.
So there was another conductor on board, and that conductor had, like, dropped a button in Hubbard's room. And so they had found that, and that was part of their evidence. And so they were wondering who this conductor was, because it was none of the conductors that were there. And then the random woman in the kimono, they don't know who she is, or where she came from, or where the kimono is. And then eventually Poirot actually finds the kimono, like, on his luggage later when he goes back to his little cart and sees that it's there. So he knows that somebody's placed it there, like, on purpose. And, you know, his assumption is that it's not somebody random who's come on the train. Because, like we said, like, the window that was, like, broken to make it seem like, oh, somebody came in and escaped. It was impossible, because they would have seen the prints in the snow. There would have been fingerprints. There would have been something.
They would not
to
have survived
indicate.
a snowstorm either. Like,
So,
they're in the middle of nowhere. It's not like the train
he knows
stopped
it's someone
in the
on
town.
board, and he knows that, you know,
it's one of the first two classes
messing with him at this point with the kimono.
And they, just for the record, they hid the conductor's outfit in the ladies' maid's room because she was the one who spotted him.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
So we have, like, those bits of evidence, as well as there was a pipe cleaner left next to Ratchet's body, which was from the Colonel. And he's the only one who smokes a pipe on the entire, like, train cars that they have interviewed. So they're like, all of these seem like, you know, fake pieces of evidence, which is strange. As well as there was a broken watch in his pajama pant pocket.
So you weren't sure of the real time of death.
Was it 12:15 or 1:15?
It was 1:15.
1:15.
Because it was like 23 minutes to 1 that he heard the other interesting fact. They heard Ratchet speak in French, but McQueen had accidentally made a point to say that Ratchet can only speak English.
Yes, and that's the reason he had him there in the first place, was because he can speak many languages, whereas Ratchet could not. So
things were fishy, basically. Yes.
And they all kind of accidentally poke holes in each other's stories, even though it seems pretty, like, airtight, like we said at first. But you know, things start to kind of unravel because they kind of all come back, and then, you know, he questions all of them, like, for a second time. Yes. And this is where
all have a connection to the Armstrong case. Very intense. So we can get into that. So the conductor, I hate that I have wagon lead there when I know it's conductor in the book, but I think that was from either something I copied or they also called him that.
Okay.
But anyways, that wasn't just me making up that word. But so Michelle was the father of the nursemaid that was wrongfully accused of killing herself. So the backstory to that, real quick, is that Daisy Armstrong had
wrongfully accused and killed herself.
What'd I say?
Of killing herself.
Oh no, she was wrongfully accused of it and killed herself because of that. But so just as a quick backstory, in the Armstrong case, there was a nursemaid who was accused of the crime at first before they realized it was Cassetti. And like I said, that upset her greatly because it obviously wasn't her, and she killed herself in the sadness. And that was, Michelle was her father.
Yes.
So, pretty sad. McQueen, is this correct? I know this is in the movie, but I was worried I got confused with the movie. Was the son of the judge who was forced to lay his case on the nurse, and it ruined his career. Do you remember reading that?
He was connected through the nurse, correct?
In the movie, that's what it was, at least. That McQueen's father was the judge, and that's why he became a lawyer, and then that's why he...
I don't remember everybody's connections, I'm gonna be honest.
So that was at least the movie one. I feel like it was in the book.
I mostly remember the women, because that was like a main part of him being like, well, all the women had to be connected to the household, so I guess that's why I only remember them, and I don't really remember them as
if it's not that, then they didn't give a full connection, because some of them were kind of just like, there's kind of a connection, but there was not enough time. But in the movie, it was definitely that. Marina's gonna look it up to confirm, but I will keep going while she does that. So next is the valet. As we mentioned, his name is Edward Henry Masterman, and he actually, before being the valet to... By the way, valet isn't like car valet. It was kind of like another style of like, it was like a servant or a butler. So keep that in mind. He was the valet to Armstrong. So yeah, that's his connection. Then I'm going to skip this one because it's kind of most important. Then we have Greta. She was the other nurse. So Daisy had two nurses. She had a nursemaid and a nurse, and I actually looked up the difference in those so you guys can know. A nurse is like the main nurse helper, and the nursemaid's kind of like her understudy, who does more of like the work with a baby. But Greta was the other nurse that was there, and she didn't stop Cassetti. So that was very devastating for her to watch the kidnapping of Daisy and see the accusation of her friend. McQueen's at the top somewhere. If you go, there's a character list of them.
Oh, I know. I was saying, because this is just saying, like, so McQueen is the only one who, like, denied it, like, for the most part, that he had any connection to the Armstrong case. And I believe he's the last one to find out, like, what his connection is.
Yeah. Well, not the last one.
Like, he's the last man?
Yeah, Mrs. Hubbard's the last one.
Yeah. Because of the opposite thing.
Yeah.
Yes, but you can continue on with, like, the rest of the characters.
Sorry, I got distracted reading what it said about McQueen. Then we have Hildegard Schmidt. If you remember, she is the lady's maid to the princess. And she was actually the Armstrong chef. And we know that because she kind of made some comments about, like, the food that just seemed too weird to be, like, a regular person's opinion.
Yes, and he kind of tricks her being like, oh, like, you must have been a good cook. And she was like, yeah, I was.
So that was a lot of how he caught them, by the way, is he made assumptions and then just kind of, like, dropped them on them, and they assumed he knew them as fact, and they, like, admitted to it. Then we have, we'll just go to Cyrus Hardman. So he was actually a New York detective / police officer, and he fell in love with the nursemaid who killed herself. So he was very upset about that. Then we have, like, this is a long list. Gonna skip them. I'm trying to go in importance of, like, the people. The princess, as we already mentioned, she was the godmother to the Armstrongs. We knew that. A good friend of the grandmother, Linda Arden. And now we have Mary. As we heard before, she was a governess. It is discovered she was actually the governess of the Armstrongs. So, a lot of connections. The colonel, he fought in the war with Armstrong. Very big deal. Did you find stuff on McQueen?
No.
Well, dang it, I'm going to go with my judge story. That was in the movie, at least.
No, we're not allowed to watch the movie anymore.
Well, that was in the movie. We'll just say it as that. We'll say his movie alibi.
I know there was something, but now I'm, like, getting confused because I don't know if what you're saying is from the book or not, and I don't know what my mind is thinking.
What's your mind thinking?
Well, my mind was thinking that, like, I don't even... Not to be like, I don't remember him, but, like, I do remember him, but I don't think that his connection was that important.
That's what I'm saying.
To everybody
no,
else's.
that's what I said too. I think it could be that they didn't really give him as much of a connection.
Like, he was kind of like a...
So we're both thinking that. So most likely it's Hector McQueen.
Yes.
McQueen's backstory is really just, like, not that deep of a connection. They didn't really tell it, so in the movie they added that information.
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Continue.
Don't worry, I was thinking that too. Okay, so we've said more of the outer people. Now to get to the, like, even more connected people. So the Count and Countess. Ooh, how are they connected? Well, the Countess, I'm going to answer my own question, is the sister to Sonia Armstrong, the mother of Daisy, which, by the way, we hadn't mentioned yet. After Daisy died, Sonia was so upset she went into labor because she was pregnant with their second child and she died giving birth.
Yes. And the child also died. And in his despair,
Colonel Armstrong killed himself. So the whole family died. So Countess Andretti is actually the sister, Helena, to Sonia Armstrong.
Yes.
And the Count is protecting his wife because he loves her.
And the way that they, like, describe her, they make her seem like she's, like, super foreign, so she would have, like, no connection to it. Which, like, the whole time were you thinking, like, how could they make this one, like, American girl look so foreign that she would not look American at all to fool people?
No, because I saw the movie first, and that's not how they did in the movie.
Oh.
She always just seemed odd. Like, she seemed the same throughout the whole thing.
But like, I mean, like, the look of her, because the way they describe her is like, oh, she must be from somewhere else because she's foreign.
Yeah,
like,
I don't.
She
and
can't be an
she
American
did a fake
girl.
accent too. So I think that's
they were
also
like,
what
dark hair fooled us, not American. I don't know who that is.
Which is something we will talk about. But yeah, it was kind of like, really. So finally, I believe we have one left, and that is Mrs. Hubbard, who is. Are you ready for it?
Dun, dun, dun.
Are you?
I'm ready.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
You seem very calm.
Yeah.
Linda Arden. And if you didn't catch who that was earlier, it is the mother to Sonia Armstrong. So yes. Everyone is freaking connected.
Yes, and she's also quite the actress.
She is. She was a famous actress. And you realize the character, or the person, Mrs. Hubbard, was just a character. The obnoxious voice was just acting. She even makes a point that she loves doing comedy roles.
I won't say that, actually, because I was going to be like, that's my favorite part, but we talk about that later.
Yeah.
But
well, you can say it.
Yeah, but I loved that part. I thought it was so funny.
I did
and
too.
So I did, like I said, I went back after I had read the novel, and I think it was this past week that I had just, like, listened to, like, the parts when they were being, like, interviewed, like, their alibis, and then, like, the ending, because I wanted to hear that part, like, when... Because obviously the person doing the audiobook does, like, the voices, so he, like, changed her voice from when she was acting versus, like, when she wasn't. She's like, oh, okay, well.
So basically, there's 13 listed here. All 13 of those people are connected to the Armstrong case. And Poirot calls them together and tells them there are two things that could have happened with this murder. One, the one we said where someone from the outside broke in, killed him and left. Or the second one, where they all worked together to get revenge for Daisy, Sonia, and the Colonel. Did they ever say his first name? I don't know why I asked.
Wait, who, the Colonel?
Colonel Armstrong. I think he's just always called Colonel Armstrong.
At least he's mostly referred to as
Colonel Armstrong.
Yeah.
I don't know why I asked these questions to just, like, throw us off and scare us. So he basically figures out their plan, and that is their plan.
Yeah, so I guess we didn't really talk about, like, so once he pokes holes in everybody's stories, a few of them kind of come clean that they're, like, connected, and then, like I said, McQueen is the one who, like, till the very end was like, no, I'm not connected at all, like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, you know, they go all the way till the end, and then he's continuing to, like, interview and talk to them, and so that's where he comes up with his, like, his idea of, like, what has happened and what has occurred. So this, like, you know, goes on, and then he kind of is just, like, in bed, and then he's like, I keep wanting to call it, like, a brain blast, like from Jimmy Neutron, like he's having a brain blast there. So after that, like, the next day is when he calls them all together and, like, this is what I think, and it's either this really, like, improbable thing that we've all discussed is impossible, or it's this really impossible thing which is actually possible, which is, you can continue.
Yeah, I was saying that they all worked together to get their revenge.
Yes.
Which turned out to be the truth. They admitted that it was correct. Linda Arden was the ringleader, obviously, because she was upset about the death of her daughter.
Yes.
And then they all had their own personal reasons for being upset about what happened. So they worked together to kill Cassetti.
Yep.
Because he never got his justice.
Which is why all of the stab wounds seem mysteriously different.
Because it was from different people.
Because they all kind of took turns. Which I see, like, seems very cathartic to me.
And that's why I said there's 13 in this list, but there's 12 stab wounds because the Countess doesn't do the stabbing.
Yes.
She's considered, like, it probably would have harmed her to like stab somebody. So her husband takes the place of her.
Yes.
In the revenge.
Which is why, obviously 12, like
Yes,
jury.
I was going to talk about that.
They do mention that in the novel as well, so we're not like super smart for thinking of that or anything. But they do mention that because, in America, we have like the 12 people on the jury, and those are the people who decide, like, in the courts and everything. And so they feel like since he's escaped from justice in America, that they need to be then the jury, the judge, and the executioner all at once. So
it's down to Poirot to decide, are they? And we let them go, or do I tattletale? Yes. And he ultimately decides to say, nope, the first story is the truth. Someone snuck on. You guys are innocent bystanders. Goodbye. And he walks away and just leaves them all there to their own.
Yeah. What it is that he's like, oh, well, essentially, I have this information. The doctor has this information. And then, like, Book has the information. And so they kind of all just kind of agree with each other, like them three. Even the doctor's like, oh, yes, my findings will show that what you were saying is correct.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, okay, we're all going to back each other up. We're going to say that's what we think happened.
Realize this guy's awful.
And then once the police ask you the same questions that Poirot has already asked you, they're going to not be able to figure it out. So their plan's going to go exactly how they wanted it to. The only reason that any of this happened and that Poirot did figure out this mystery is that he was accidentally on board. He was never supposed to be on board. Like we said, there was like, oh, the mysterious man who never showed up for his car. But that was because they had like reserved the train cars.
Yeah, I had to look that up to confirm if that was a person who just accidentally missed or if it was a fake person.
Yeah, so they like didn't want anybody to be on there, obviously, because they wanted to murder Cassetti. So and so then when they got snowed in, that kind of put a wrench in their plans, and they were like, okay, should we go through with it?
I think they were just supposed to drive through an area, and it would like...
And so then when somebody got like on or off board, then they would be like, oh, well, we can blame it on like, we were at the station, and somebody got on board, and So they were like, okay, well, guess we just gotta go for it anyways, because it's now or never, which like, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was kind of like their plan C at that point, was to continue in the snow. Yeah. But yes, so that's essentially what happens in the end. He decides to not turn them in, and they get to,
go on with their lives.
They get their justice, and everything is great, it seems. I don't know. We haven't read any of the rest of the Poirot books, so we don't know if there's any reference to them later. So now, we will move on to any like themes or symbols or anything interesting we found. Might be most notable, or are we doing that after?
We usually do that after, but I mean, it doesn't really matter.
So we just put it incorrect. Okay, never mind. I'm getting confused.
No, mine's here. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Either way, I said the symbols, so we'll do symbols.
Yes. So, anything you want to bring up?
Yes. I didn't know if you wanted to go first, but I'll go first. So obviously there's a lot of themes in this book. I know last month, almost a week, I said watch out for infanticide. Should be obvious. Even other things outside of Daisy were infanticide. I'll let you figure that out on your own. But I decided to just stick to one, and the one I chose was the theme of prejudice. So, I mean, it's kind of pretty obvious, as you've heard Marina hint at, like, and I've hinted at a little bit. They had to blame the Italian man because he's Italian, and Italians murder, and they love to stab, and they don't care about murder.
I just think that was like my favorite stereotype. So was like not even that, just like, oh, they're aggressive, like, oh, that is the weapon of an Italian.
They stab.
Like, that's so funny to me.
So everything was, a lot of the opinions were built around opinions and prejudices and like racism or just all these other awful things. Although the book didn't fully go into race. That was something I was going to talk about, is the movie does more. Which I can talk a little bit more. I guess I'll just talk about it now.
I would say it probably doesn't go into race that much because a lot of them look generally similar.
That's what I was going to say.
And that's why the Italian gets the blame, because he's the most, I don't know.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's written in like the 20s or 30s, so it's not like a very diverse time.
Right.
So the closest they got to like diversity in that time was Italians and women. White women.
Yeah.
But
everybody is European, so.
Exactly. But they're like European American.
Yes.
But the movie was filmed in like 2016. So I noticed they made the Colonel, who also is combined with the Doctor's character. Try not to let that confuse you. He's a black actor. And I think they did that because that's such a prominent discussion right now, that they kind of wanted to like really be like, this is a story that involves prejudice and like people making, because in the movie, that's something that, like, this isn't talked about in the book. It's just like, oh, Poirot loves to solve mysteries, he'll solve it. Where in the movie, part of the way book gets Poirot to do the investigation, because he didn't really want to, was kind of like, think of the innocent men and women, you know, the Italian man's gonna get blamed, and the black man's gonna get framed. I don't know why my mind blanked. And he's gonna lose his ability to be a doctor, and all of this stuff that's just awful. So that's really what got Poirot to help in the movie. But yeah.
So they make Poirot seem more, like, heroic.
Yeah, because he's ready to, like, retire, basically, in the movie. But he's like, no, like, I'll help these people.
I like how, like, begrudgingly Poirot kind of does things. I don't know. I like that about his character in the novel. So I can see if there's, like, a difference there. I mean, that makes more sense for movies. Because I don't think his character would come across as
it kind of
interesting.
Like conflict.
Yes. In, like, a movie adaptation.
But yeah, in the 30s and the 20s, there's no diversity. So an Italian man.
Right. Italian.
But yeah, that was basically, and it was with women too, because they would say things like, with a governess, for example, they'd be like, well, a British woman, you know, they don't really have a temperament for rage. Yeah. And it's like,
the way that they said British people never get angry, and I was like, have you heard a British person speak ever?
Yeah. So they had just like, they weren't listening to people's alibis, they weren't listening to anything, it was just prejudice, and kind of, it was mixed into a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting that, like, Book was the main character that all of this comes through, and that he's the one who kind of mentions, like, oh, well, the English never do this, and, like, must be the Italian because of stabbing, or, like, oh, the women can't do this because they're too weak, or he's also the one who was like, oh, it must have been a woman because it's a crime of passion, and she's, like, going crazy. So I feel like he's kind of the scapegoat for, like, oh, these are kind of all the panics of people at the time, and, like, immigration and things like that. So that he's the one saying what people who might have been reading the book originally would think. Yeah. So he's kind of like that little, like an evil Jiminy Cricket, kind of, you know? Like, he's the one like, oh, well, what about if we just were racist? Or what if we were sexist? Like, who's going to be the easy target here? And so, I don't know, like, that's kind of interesting to me that there's just the one singular character. Like, the rest of them are kind of like, yeah, whatever, maybe you have a point, but maybe you don't. So we're going to investigate some more. But he's the one who's like, no, we know it's the Italian because this. Yeah. So, I don't know, they kind of just put all of that into one guy.
And then what was very interesting and kind of, like, really brought a point to the theme of prejudice, like, it wasn't just there for no reason, is that Poirot seemed to be, not saying he's not prejudiced, but he seemed to be the least prejudiced in his investigation abilities. So he might have had some of those thoughts, like, I mean, he called a woman toad-faced. He's obviously not the nicest person. He told Cassetti he doesn't like his face. But when it came to investigating, it was facts. Yes. And I think that was part of the reason why it became clear Poirot was the only one who could have solved this case, because any of the other police officers and all the other people were getting their prejudices and their biases in the way. Yeah. So I thought that was a pretty interesting point.
Just in life. Yeah. In society.
Well, I think I wrote here, it, like, uncovers that. Yeah. By, like, letting go of prejudices and whatnot, you can actually like discover the truth of things, and you're not letting your biases get in the way. I know.
Which is why I'm sure that contributes to the popularity of the character as well.
He's a better
and,
person.
Like, why it was, like, I don't know, so, like, revolutionary that this character existed, and, like, that's why so many of the novels were so popular then and still now to this day, because a lot of people, I don't know, they kind of need that blank slate character. To kind of, like, put themselves into their shoes. Yeah. And I think it's easier to do that when somebody kind of is like, okay, well, we're just going to care about the fact, and we're not going to, like, put any other kind of, like, preconceived notions into our thoughts before.
Yeah. And of course, he's the only one that can come to a logical conclusion. And then he ultimately, though, makes the decision of whether they're innocent or guilty.
Yeah, which is kind of ironic in the way that they have decided themselves that they're going to be, like, you know, the jury, the judge, and the executioner, whereas, like, Poirot's here, and so now he's kind of the one who gets to decide their fate, so he is then the judge to them, which I kind of thought was, like, an interesting, you know, play on that. I really appreciate any, like, I don't know, courtroom nods. I feel like I'm always just, like, learning too much about, like, courts and true crime and stuff, so I'm like, oh, I understand this. Or, like, it made me think of 12 Angry Men, which is like a very famous.
I've never seen it or read it, but I've heard of it.
Yes, we had to read it in school actually, so another required reading. But it was we read it in class because it's like short. But yeah, we read that in class, and then I watched the movie. But yes, it just reminded me of that, and then like I don't know, anything that has to do with like the people like getting their own justice for their own like prerogative.
People really like those kind of stories because I think it makes them feel better.
Yeah, I think so too. Because like even if it's people who are doing something for the wrong reason, like or the wrong thing for the right reason, like people can relate to that. And I think that is something that we see in a lot of novels, and then especially this novel. And a lot of people probably are like, oh, well, I wish that, like, I could just do that. Like, my fantasy of, doing this person who's, like, done me wrong. Yeah, or maybe not to, like, that extent. But, like, everybody has, like, that idea of, like, I'm gonna, give back to that person who's wronged me. Yeah.
Or just getting what you feel like is deserved in general. But yeah, so like I mentioned, there's a lot of themes in this book, and it's a really great book, but I just thought that one was a really interesting point that was really talked about. I don't know if you wanted to add to it or if that's basically what you got to.
That was basically what we were talking about.
And the jury and the judges, yeah.
And yes, the whole crime aspect, and then, the prejudice and how that contributes to, how Poirot does his work. And
prejudice and jury and judges.
Yes.
Refreshing to see Poirot not do it, I guess.
Yeah,
to some extent.
In a novel that we're reading and we're like, oh, okay, this was written, not recently to us. It is kind of nice to have a protagonist that's not horrible. Yeah. Or at least in this novel, he's not horrible. Yeah. Maybe in the other ones, I don't know. He's in a lot of them. We'll have to continue.
I mean, usually the protagonist, is okay, so we'll see.
Yeah, so I don't know, what do you think? I guess we can kind of just continue on to, what kind of impact this has had on, media. I know you've talked about, the movie a little bit, and I'm pretty sure there's, an older movie.
There is, I just didn't watch it.
Oh, okay, so you watched, so the one that Monica has been referencing
one.
is, the 2016, newer version.
Yes.
Is that 2016 already?
I want to say yes.
Oh, wow.
It was some date like that, because I remember seeing it being like, Jesus. But I was going to say, because we skipped it, something notable that I really liked is I didn't even think about the jury thing at all. I know we've been talking about it, but I just want to point out, when I saw that it was 12 stabbings because the Countess didn't do one, I was like, that is so interesting and so smart. And I also liked, as I mentioned, I've never read a mystery novel before, and I'm just, amazed at the work that has to go behind it. The amount of story upon story upon story and connections. I know you have to do that in, all novels for continuity, but,
no, I really thought that. I remember thinking that, okay, so when I was 13, and then I read, and then there was none, and it completely, blew my head out of the water. I was like, wow, I can't believe it, because all of that makes sense, if you go back in the novel, but I just, was blown away that was, possible to do, in, a writing format.
Yeah.
And I feel like I get that way with every, mystery, media that I consume, whether that be, a TV show, it's been books, it's been even video games where it's a mystery, and then at the very end you get that protagonist that goes through and explains it like Poirot does, very also reminiscent of Sherlock Holmes, where at the end they
Scooby-Doo.
Yes, it's Scooby-Doo, where they explain everything.
We see Frankenstein,
and they kind of just go through everything, and this is why that happened, and this is why what I'm saying is the only thing that makes sense, and you're like, no, that can't make sense, but then they go through and poke apart everything. And I think just that in mystery novels is maybe why people are so drawn to them, especially because in real life there is a lot of cold cases, there's a lot of things that just have no answer, and so for a mystery novel to be able to wrap up things so nicely and explain literally almost every single question that you've had while consuming that media is why mystery novels especially have just continued its popularity to this day. And I think that's why Agatha Christie stays where she is.
It's it might be, this one wasn't as disturbing to read, but while some mystery novels might be disturbing to read, in the end you get that nice little relief of oh, I understand what's going on. Or, like you said, in cold cases it's just we don't know.
Yeah, in real life we have so many questions that never get answered, so when you consume these pieces of media, you know that you're going to get that payoff in the end, which is why I think that people, I don't know, are drawn to them.
Yeah. And that actually segues us really well into our cultural impact, because, like we mentioned, this is based on the Lindbergh case, and this book came out 2 years after that, so it was definitely still raw for American citizens who had, obviously, most Americans knew this story. I mean, they still know it. And this book pretty much wraps it up for them, because it's like, it wasn't a cold case, but it kind of was. I don't believe in the actual story they caught him. They, like, way later realized, oh, it could have been this guy, but it was kind of like later. So this book kind of made it like, here's the guy who did it, now he's dead. Congratulations, the guy that killed the baby's got his justice. So a lot of Americans I'm willing to bet in that time frame were like, yes, the guy who killed this baby is gone. He got his justice.
Again, very cathartic. Like
very
I was saying, the stabbing. It's almost like you got to stab him, you know? You feel it.
But yeah, that's a big cultural impact. And a lot of the other ones I had written down were just basically on the movie, and that's kind of what I said. I watched the more recent movie, enjoyed all the celebrities in it that I liked.
I think that's the only thing, Ridley. Like, so I remember seeing the trailer for the movie and being like, wow, there's so many super famous people in that. I should watch it. And then I just never did. Yeah. And then I heard it was bad, so then I didn't seek it out after that, so.
It was okay.
But I know you said, like, it's fun because there's all the celebrities. I think, honestly, that makes me like movies just automatically, but...
I think I was explaining to you before, too, like, the movie's not bad. It's just, like, they make it too quirky. Like, the book isn't quirky. It's like, here's a mystery, let's solve it. And I don't think it's bad to add jokes, but the jokes kind of fall flat. Like, his mustache is too big, and he wears, like, a mask over it, and his eggs have to be exactly the same size for him to eat them. And the people were too much, and it just, it was almost like caricatured of the book, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Because, I mean, even in the book, they're already characters. Yeah. So, like, to exaggerate that further kind of distracts from the original point that, Christie was making when she wrote the novel.
I will say something interesting, though, that this didn't happen in the book, but in the movie, and I didn't even know when I watched it, I just was looking at memes for our Instagram, and this is one that popped up, is that in the movie, in the end, when he tells them all, what he's discovered, they're lined up like the Last Supper in the movie.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That's pretty. I'll
wait.
We'll
12.
Post the pictures.
12 disciples.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yep.
I love that.
Even though there were like 13 at the table because of the Count and Countess, but
yeah, but they explain that in the novel that it's like the husband and wife. They count as one together. Person. Yeah. But yeah, I like that imagery. That's pretty interesting.
So that's
to me.
Pretty cool on the movie.
I guess I didn't even think about that.
I know. I didn't.
I'm gonna freak out now because anytime something relates to Catholicism, my head is like blown. And I'm like, wow, I need to just like dissect that.
Catholic raised mind.
Yes.
So we probably could have even gone into that with the movie, honestly, but we're here for the book, not the movie.
Yes.
But yeah, so that was
I do like
cool
that imagery. So I'll probably go look up that scene then, at least to see that.
I have a picture saved.
Okay, cool.
I'll show you.
So I do like that.
But yeah, that was something I wanted to bring up because I thought that was just very interesting. And then, like you said, it does, like, now you just want to sit there and dissect, like, well, are they the 12 disciples?
Yeah, what does that say about religion? Even though it mentioned religion, like, 0%. But...
Maybe the movie did more, so...
Yeah, maybe there's, like, a separate connotation they wanted to attach.
We'll watch the movie again. Me again, at least, you for the first time.
Yes, I can watch it for the first time.
What is religious?
I can give it a review, like, on our socials.
Yeah, give, like, a second podcast of, like, this one's just of the movie.
Yeah. Okay, stay tuned for when we launch our next podcast, Summer Reading List, we review the movies.
Very long name.
I feel like every book we've covered has a movie adaptation so far.
Yes. We are reading very popular books.
Yes, that's true. Almost every summer reading list has
a
movie, like books that have inspired movies. If not direct adaptations, then movies inspired by them.
And this one has a few movies. Like, like you said, there was an older version, and then they made a sequel to the movie, but not like a direct sequel, because it's kind of more of like series based. It's called something else in a series, but a collection. So like Perot's Investigations, they do Death on the Nile.
Yes.
As a movie that just came out this year, which I will have to watch. I love movies. So yeah, that's basically my take on the cultural impact, and I know we have discussed a lot about it.
Yes.
So yeah.
Okay, well, I guess for now, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. So I'm just gonna let everyone know to make sure to do your homework for next time. We're gonna be reading F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby,
Yay.
which I'm very excited about. I feel like that's a fan favorite. Anybody who picks any book that they've had to read in school, like, oh, I guess I like Gatsby.
Honestly, whether you like Gatsby or not, you should probably read it.
Gatsby is such an incredibly short novel that if there's any novel that you should pick to actually read and not just read Spark Notes, I would recommend The Great Gatsby.
Also, if you like point of view, this one's a heavy point of view book, which I will be talking about next month. I cannot
wait to talk about unreliable narration again.
I love unreliable narrators. Yes, that's why we're friends. I cannot tell you how much I love unreliable narrators. Because then it's its own mystery, because you can pick apart, like, ooh.
Yes, we're creating the mysteries in the non-mystery novels.
It's all a lie. That's a movie reference. See if you can figure it out.
And I'm sure in a few months we'll probably go back and visit Agatha Christie again.
For sure,
there's so many more novels, like we said.
We'll do the one you mentioned for sure.
Yes, and then there were none fans out there. I'm sure there's a lot of you.
We were deciding between that or Murder on the Orient Express.
Yes, we knew we were gonna do both, but just like the timing.
We couldn't decide which one was more famous. So if you also want to contact us and let us know which one you knew about more than the other, because that'd be interesting. Because I had never heard of it, and then there were none.
I know, and I was shook because like I had heard of Murder on the Orient Express, but I hadn't read it. Yeah. But anyways, I guess we can make a poll on our Twitter and we can find out which one you know.
So speaking of our Twitter, make sure you follow all of our social media accounts, which we will put in the show's notes if you're listening to the podcast, and the video's description if you are watching us on YouTube.
Okay. So make sure to also pop over, like, no matter where you listen or watch, to Apple Podcasts and like rate and review us. That's like the best way to help out the show. It's free. It takes 30 seconds. You can subscribe to our YouTube and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts. If you listen anywhere else, subscribe there. But like, if you could just pop on to Apple Podcasts, that would be pretty cool. Just give us a little rating. Maybe if we get some ratings, we could like, always read it on the show or something, which I think would be fun.
We really want to hear people's opinions. Yeah. Like, we want you to read the books and tell us like if there's something specific, like with Great Gatsby, what you want to talk about.
Or even if you had more questions, like even if you didn't read or anything, like just leave us questions.
Or if you thought of something with Murder on the Orient Express that we didn't say.
Yes.
Like,
or even if you've just watched the movie, like literally ask us any questions.
I will talk about the movies. Like I considered wanting to make this like a movie review show, or being like, let's do the movies and the books. Let's do all of it.
Movie review corner.
Like, you don't understand. I will talk to you about the movies.
Okay, so like, just talk to us. We would love to hear from you guys. Rating, reviewing, that's the best way to help us out. So I guess that's gonna be it for us.
And Murder on the Orient Express.
Yes, that's gonna be it for now.
Yeah. See you.
It is the death of us. In this podcast. Well, this episode.
Next month, as we mentioned, for our Valentine's Day honor special of Love and Great Gatsby, and why that makes me laugh to say that. But bye, guys.
Bye.
See ya. Love you. Bye.